Welcome to the Neuracore Podcast. I'm Stephen James, founder of Neuracore. Join us as we talk with the researchers, founders, and engineers who are shaping Robotics 2.0, the next generation of intelligent learning machines. I've been fortunate to spend the last decade at the forefront of robot learning, from attending the very first conference on robot learning back in 2016 to my research at Imperial College and UC Berkeley to founding the Dyson Robot Learning Lab in London. Now at Neuracore, we're focused on tackling the infrastructure challenge holding back the field. But what excites me most are the conversations with other builders and innovators. That's what this series is all about, speaking with pioneers in robotics, AI, and automation about the technical hurdles, the cultural shift, and the future of working as intelligent machines become part of our world. We kick off our first conversation talking about hype. Every week, there's another viral video, another humanoid demo, billions of dollars flowing into the space, and yet the gap between what's being shown and what's actually possible has never felt wider, especially to those of us working actually in the field. So today, I'm sitting down with Matt, founder of Trossen Robotics. Matt's been at this for years, building robotic arms, mobile platforms, and systems that actually have to work in the real world, not just in stage demos. What I find fascinating about his journey is that he's been witnessing robotics evolve from being a niche academic pursuit to something mainstream. We're going to have an honest conversation about managing the hype in robot learning, the media trends, the humanoid frenzy, and what it really means for those of us working in the field. So Matt, thanks so much for joining me. It's great to have you here.
Hey there.
Hello. How are you doing? It's been a little while.
Yeah. Congratulations on your funding round, man.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Both terrifying and exciting, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's chaos, but in a good way.
That's great.
Yeah. So topic today, I guess, is about hype, right? So there's just so much energy right now in robotics. And I guess we're going to delve into this, but there can be a lot of good things that come out of hype, but there can also be a lot of bad things, right? And that's kind of really what I kind of would love to talk to you about today. But I think let's go back to the very beginning and just as a kind of intro, you can just tell me about like how Trossen started, because you've been kind of in the robotics space for like a really long time, and I'm sure have seen quite a few different hype cycles, right?
Yeah, certainly. Well, if I want to take you all the way back, it was 21 years ago that I had an idea, 3 a.m, sat up in bed and thought, this is amazing. Why hasn't anyone created this yet? And it wasn't robotics, but it was kind of in that same space. It was an idea to make little I/O components that you could plug into a computer and program against. And it was because I wanted to create something that was like an interactive environment where the lights and like the fans and the vibrating motors in the seat and all that could be synchronized to like music. So it was almost like I wanted to build like a roller coaster ride that was sort of virtual, that you could go through and have all these physical sensations. Well, at the time I was a programmer, but I know nothing about electronics, or very little, right? I thought, well, wouldn't that be cool if I could code on my computer and operate all these components? And I literally sat in bed. I'm like, that's a brilliant idea. Like, I'll sell 1 million of them. And so I was sketching ideas, and I was like, ooh, servo controllers and motor controllers and input from switches and sliders and buttons and force sensors and range sensors and light sensors and all these things, right? So as somebody who likes to tinker and build, the type of people that are in the robotics space, I thought this was amazing, right? Well, I woke up the next day and I did a search on the internet, as one does, and I found a company in Canada had already created this thing. And so I had a broken heart for a day or two, and then I decided, hey, just call them up and resell their stuff. And so Fidgets USA was born, and though that company is still there, Fidgets in Canada, which is actually physical widgets. So it's PHIDGETS. And I became a reseller for them. And then when I brought all these components in, basically like PC-based electronics building, I started buying the things to go with them. So I was buying servos and motors and lights. And then I was like, oh, well, now I need the brackets for them. Now I need a chassis. And literally one day I woke up and I had a robotics store. So it wasn't planned. And I just sort of followed passion and followed the interests and where it led. And it was robotics. And I realized at that time, this is the future of robotics. Robotics won't be on microprocessors for very much longer. It's going to be PC based, right? And so that was sort of the first theory of the company, was that eventually everyone's going to use high-level languages on PCs to program their robots. And I tried to network, and I made some friends, and I actually went out to the valley and tried to pitch this concept to a lot of negative responses. I talked to some old like engineers back from like the 3Com days and stuff, and they just didn't get it. They thought I was an idiot, and why would you put all this overhead on your robot when a microcontroller is super fast, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I was 20 years too early, really, you know, or let's say 10 years, because it took a long time for ROS to come out and for people to move to Linux systems. And eventually it went in that direction, which was pretty obvious to just about anyone in the field. And it got there. So along the way, I was selling hobby and educational robots, selling to anybody who would buy anything, really. And then we were adopted more into education, and the hobby sort of fell off. We used to sell crawlers and little desktop humanoids. And that was like, I wouldn't call it a hype cycle,
Mm-hmm.
but a market cycle where all of a sudden everyone wanted mini humanoids for maybe 5 years there. And you had about a dozen companies pop up in the market, and they were making humanoids that are about, you know, a foot tall. And they battled it out, and it was a big bloodbath in the market until there was only 2 left. And so Robotics was one of the companies that won that market. And I'm trying to remember the name of the other one. I'd have to Google it probably, but there was one other, I think, in Japan that survived as well. And that was a cycle of watching new technology arrive, interest in a market, a dozen players show up, bloodbath, they fight it out, and then you end up with just 2 of them that win the whole market, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very common technology adoption life cycle, right?
Yeah.
So we eventually found our niche in making manipulators between $500 and $5,000. There was really like a gap in the market there. There was tons on the hobby side and tons on the high-end side. This was before cobots existed. And that's kind of where we made our mark. And so it evolved from selling boxes of servos and brackets to pre-assembling them so that you get an assembled arm. So we found people were happy to pay for that. And then it was adding code in. So we'd have the right controllers, then the APIs to connect to the computer, then the ROS packages, the hello worlds and things that people needed to get up and running, and all of that being packaged.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what started growing the company. And then, as you know, about 18 months ago, Stanford made the Aloha kits with our arms, and it blew up overnight. Just went crazy and viral, right? Which is what we're here to talk about. So luckily we were there, right place, right time sort of scenario, but we've been there for, you know, nearly 20 years at that point. And so we are one of the companies that's riding this AI wave as it grows and grows and grows. And it's really exciting. That's sort of the journey, sort of a long wandering journey to end up here. And we've been kind of adopted by this community, and we love it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we're talking a lot about hype here and, you know, the good things that come from it and like bad things. And of course, I think this is a very positive thing, right? So, you know, people are very excited, and rightly so, right? There's a lot of great things we're seeing from these technologies. And you've been here kind of, you know, since the start, but maybe nobody's really been paying that much attention. And now suddenly, boom, you're here at the right time. And you've really benefited, right, from this kind of like craze in robot learning. So this is a very positive outcome, and it's going to be interesting as we kind of go through this conversation in contrast with maybe some of the negatives that could come from this hype, right?
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's pros and cons to everything, right? And with hype, the obvious one is the pro is it brings attention. And that can be anything from new students entering robotics to companies saying, hey, let's take a look at this. It's time to start seeing how this can help our automation, to startups saying, how can we apply this technology and create new markets, to investors, right? Saying, let's pour some money into this. This is hot. And then obviously the negative side of hype is unrealistic expectations, right? Which is rampant in robotics. And it's probably for 2 reasons. One is you have people that are overhyping what the technology can do, which, you know, might be just kind of overzealous marketing behaviors. But the other is just the general public doesn't really understand where the tech is at. They're used to seeing sci-fi movies. And sometimes they see these demos, but a lot of times I don't even think it's the tech demos. I think it's movies and sci-fi and expectations that, oh, it can do this now. And people are like, no, it can't do that yet.
Yeah.
We can do it in a very constrained environment, right?
Yeah, exactly. And when you actually see a lot of these kind of like hyped videos come out, maybe you see a video of like a robot doing a backflip and it's got like 10,000 likes. Like, kind of what's going through your mind when you're seeing that video? Is that like, does it make you smile, or does it make you like, oh, not another video of this kind of going mainstream? And, and then you're there trying to, in the background, trying to make like a robot, like, I don't know, cut a carrot or something, and it's like not working. And, like, is it kind of like making people think that we're way further ahead than we actually are now that it's in the mainstream media?
Yeah. Well, when I see like acrobatic stuff, I'm very much in the camp of, well, what's the use of that? I think they're great technical challenges, and you need to have those in order to build your technologies. So, the common example is going to the moon, right? Like, there wasn't really a reason to go to the moon other than it's there. But the amount of technology that had to be created to accomplish that feat was amazing, right? What I like is like the RoboCup competitions, where they said, let's make robots that have to play soccer. Well, everyone knows we don't need robots to play soccer, but you need a goal and you need competition, because that drives people, that gets teams together, and they work hard to overcome obstacles. And it's a challenge that's very difficult, right? And in the beginning, it was hilarious. I mean, it'd be 0-0 and the robots are just falling over. They couldn't even kick. You'd be lucky if one robot kicked the ball once in an entire game. And now they're pretty good at it. Now you have boxing robots and robots that are having sprinting competitions. And so you have to set these goals to accomplish them. And I don't think there's anything wrong with companies promoting that, because they're promoting their control technology, their servo technology, their prowess at creating an overall platform. Those are all good things, right? But we can't lose focus, and start just thinking that's the only end game, because nobody needs to buy a humanoid that can do backflips. Nobody.
Yeah.
Right. So we need technology that can do something where there's eventually an ROI for a business at the end of that. And it remains to be seen, obviously, in humanoids, whether there is one or not. And you have a lot of people chasing, the dream of building an all-purpose humanoid robot, and they're showing off these capabilities because they're making great strides. But again, where's the use in that? There really isn't one. And so I'm probably of the camp where I roll my eyes at this point, because it's like, it's been done for a year. We know they can do it. Why are we still doing that? Let's get to the real work, which is making them do something functional and useful.
Yeah.
Boston Dynamics, for example, has done a great job of showing off their tech. Like every 6 months to 12 months, they'll come out and show stuff off. And I don't consider them to be like hyping, right? Because they're a research lab and they're literally showing where they're at and what they can do. The robot can do what they're showing, and it's super impressive. And they're not trying to commercialize it. Like, they're not really saying, hey, you can buy one of these, right? Like some other companies are. Yeah. So I don't really...
They're less incentivized.
Right. So they're just kind of like, hey, we're a research lab. This is where we at. Yeah, this is $1 million robot. And, maybe some other research labs own one or two of them, and that's that. And they've commercialized Spot a little bit, but they probably only sold a few hundred in the history of the company. It's a very niche robot, but again, it's the balance between hype and
Definitely.
I think those of us in the industry, we know how to read through it. Like, we see what's happening, and those of us outside the industry that are just seeing it on TikTok probably don't really understand what that means, right?
No.
What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, every time I see it, I think to myself that we don't really celebrate the failures enough in these. Like, I think it's something that we need to promote a bit more. It's like, I think back to the DARPA videos that we used to get from the Humanoid Challenge. I think it was like 2012 or something. And those were some of the best content of them just falling over, actually, right? So it really kind of told you, that's what inspired me actually to get into robotics, was like seeing these and see how far, like, it can't even do these basic stuff. And I think that's what we need with these viral videos, is also, okay, here's it doing something fantastic, then here's it actually failing doing something incredibly simple, right? Yeah. And I think that could go just as viral and people get still excited about it, but actually really promote people about, okay, what are the actual challenges that I should be investigating, not just going off and, oh, I want to make a robot do a backflip too. So I think that's what we're really missing with these videos.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like showing some balance in there.
Mm-hmm.
Then you just show the polished, technical demonstration where clearly it's a little bit scripted because robots are doing things like pausing and looking at each other. Like that is a clear red flag that that it's been scripted.
I wonder who you're talking about.
Well, it's just like you clearly programmed in some human-like behaviors, and why that it didn't learn to do that because there's no purpose for them to do that, right? Yeah. And that's not to say that the robots aren't accomplishing everything else in those videos, right? Because they probably are, but to have them highly polished like that isn't really showing the real state of the technology. And like you said, that's important, and it helps set expectations. One of the reasons is I sell to companies, right? So I sell to researchers, but I'm also starting to sell to companies that have research labs in them. So Fortune 1000 companies, and a lot of them are Fortune 100 companies. Mm-hmm. And I don't like when a customer buys something and they have the wrong expectations, because to me, there's an honesty there, right? Like, I don't want to feel like I've lied to someone and I've taken $40,000 on some kits, and they go, what the hell, man, this thing can't even, open a pickle jar, right? And it's like, well, it can't without a lot of training, right? And that's what we sell them for. We sell them to research, right? I'm very, very careful to talk about the fact that you shouldn't buy these robots expecting an ROI right now. Like, I'm not targeting nor trying to sell to people who's going to put these on assembly lines, because it's not going to work, right? And I'm very careful about it. And it's funny because my advisors, when we talk about going and looking for investment money and stuff, they're like, I don't know that I'd ever put you in a room with VCs because you're way too pragmatic and honest. Like, they're like, that's the hype machine that you need to be doing. You need to walk into a room and just be like, this is the future, and there'll be one in every home. And, that's how they give you the money. And then they're going to go and sell that up the chain to the next investor and all that. I'm like, I'm not comfortable doing that. Yeah. And I don't think it's necessary, because I think there's a large enough market in research and data collection right now to make a living as a company. Companies like you and I are serving those markets, and there's plenty of sales to go around to grow on. And then as the technology evolves and it gets a little bit better, and we can start grabbing that low-hanging fruit of doing simple automation tasks, then we can start working with startups and or Fortune 1000 companies that are trying to implement this as the next wave of automation. And it'll be here in 2 or 3 years. I think that's fine. I think it's pragmatic. I think it's honest. I think that's the approach we have. And I understand getting a lot of money in and VC cycles in some companies, it's a little bit different. They're doing moonshots, and they don't expect to have a product for 2 or 3 years. But there's a danger in that, right? What happens when your investors get tired and they say, you don't have a way to monetize any of this tech, and you just keep asking me for more money? And so when you talk about that, you have to think as a company about not just product to market fit, but fit in terms of timeline, right? You have to have market timing correct. For instance, I was 20 years too early or 10 years too early with trying to think PC-based robotics was going to be a thing. And I was just too stupid to quit. The only reason I'm still around is because I'm thick and stubborn, and I don't want to work for anyone else. Yeah. So I scratched a living until I was there when it showed up, right? But if you want to talk about really advanced, like humanoid in the home type things, I think if you ask any engineer who's worked on robots, and we know very well that's not happening anytime soon, right? Mm-hmm. So why are we asking investors to give hundreds of millions of dollars to build that product? Yeah. I don't know anyone who wants to buy one.
No. Well, that leads us nicely to talk about, humanoids and, essentially discussing trends that we think perhaps are overhyped and maybe dead ends. And I think we kind of pretty much loosely agreed here that, like, I don't know if we're fully aligned, but humanoids, I'm sure, have a purpose, right? Mm-hmm. In some form. And the argument that people often make about humanoids, of course, is that the world is built for humans, and so the natural form, of course, is a humanoid, right? And so, a humanoid should be doing absolutely everything for every single task possible. But you and I both know that they are very expensive to build, and they're also very energy inefficient, right? Especially in some scenarios where the environment is built for plainer things. So, for example, you can imagine a hospital with elderly people, right? Or people who are ill and they have to be wheeled around in trolleys, right? Perfect for an AMR vehicle, right? You don't need legs for that. Or a warehouse floor, right? You don't need legs for that again. I think there's a lot of people who are just trying to kind of, fit this sort of like square peg in a round hole sort of situation. Really just trying to basically build this humanoid form just because that's where the money is. And I think there's a real risk here, right? That the industry might lead too far perhaps into it. And then it kind of bursts, the humanoid bubble bursts and takes a lot of the other industries with it as well, which actually are trying to target more reasonable embodiments for actually solving practical problems. I'm not sure if that fully aligns with where you think about humanoids today.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with just about everything you said. I think if you talk about a bubble burst, the negative consequence of that is it scares investors, right? They go, because they listen to the nerds who are building the robots and they get led down the wrong path and they get burned. And then all of a sudden there's a pullback in investment for a while, right? That happened in the .com era with the internet, right? But the internet wasn't going anywhere, right?
Right.
Like, the technology wasn't going anywhere. Its usefulness wasn't going anywhere. It's just the investment bubble popped. A lot of people lost their asses, and it took some time to recover. And now the whole world runs on the internet, right? Robotics is going to do the same thing. So if humanoids is a dead end, and I'm not saying it is, I think that it's a market timing issue, right? There is a place for legs in the world. It's just, I don't think it's inside factories and buildings. I think it's uneven, terrain outside. That's why nature built legs, right? Nature doesn't build wheels.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I'm gonna call. So there is that problem, right? That there might be a bubble burst of investment for a little while. Now, if you are a company that has, a good market fit and you're using robotics technology, I think you'll be fine, right? If you're making another humanoid, well, you're going to be in trouble because no one's going to give you money, right? To your debate about, whether or not humanoids are the right form factor, that is a common discussion that all of us robo nerds have. It's who says that humanoids are the ultimate form, right? That this appendage is correct with 1 thumb and 4 fingers, right? Like, obviously it's efficient, and nature did build us the way it built us, because we do work well for certain purposes. But if you look at like a factory, let's look at a large factory that does something like build cars or something. The weakest link in the factory is the little hairless monkeys that are running around trying to operate the machines, right? We can be squished easily, we're slow, we're inaccurate, so if you're going to bring the next wave of automation, why would you shape it like the little hairless monkey that's the weak spot, right? If you look at the robots they're able to carry thousands of pounds of weight, whether it's an AMR or a huge robotic arm, it can weld, with extreme accuracy. It doesn't get tired, right? When people make the argument about a humanoid being this sort of all-purpose robot that's going to work in the whole world because we're shaped that way, I think that falls apart when you look at like a factory, because you're not going to take a robot and then make it drive a forklift, right? Yeah. You were just going to automate the forklift itself, right? It doesn't make any sense to try and replicate the little hairless monkey to climb into the forklift, right? You don't need it to operate computers. It's going to wirelessly talk to the system that's running the factory, right? When it comes to carrying things around, this is the one where I say things because I think it's so ridiculous, right? Why would you have a humanoid carrying stuff around when something with wheels can carry 100 times the weight with 10 times the stability and 10 times the speed? It when I see videos of humanoids carrying things, I laugh because it's absurd. It's the wrong technology, right? That'd be like if you wanted to make an AMR and then give it like 100 little legs like centipedes instead of wheels. Like, why would you do that? It's the wrong form factor. So I think people that want to make humanoids and say that sort of like this is the universal robot, kind of think that they're going to make the iPhone of robots, right? And robots aren't like cell phones where one version is the ultimate version. They're like vehicles, right? We don't have one vehicle. We have buses and sports cars and family vans and dump trucks and semis that do deliveries and cranes and plows. You have all different types of vehicles to fit each use case scenario. And that's the way robotics is going to be, obviously. You're going to have an ideal form factor for moving stuff in a factory, an ideal form factor for delivering food, an ideal form factor for assisting in a operation, right? There's going to be hundreds of thousands of form factors for robotics, right? There will not be one to rule them all.
Yep.
And I think that's, like, to your point, humans aren't the ultimate end, right? So you might decide that 3 arms is the best, or 4 arms if they're going to be on an assembly line, and we're not ideal, right? So now here's a positive thing about the humanoid shape that I will say that makes plenty of sense. Right now in machine learning, we're using imitation learning, and humans are training the robots. So it obviously makes really good sense that the robot is shaped in an intuitive way for us to train it, because we do it through puppetry, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So having 3 arms doesn't make sense because we don't have 3 arms to train it, right? So what I think will happen, and here's my prediction, and we can put this on the internet, find out if I'm right or wrong in 10 years, is that we will use humanoid shapes for a while, or tabletop 6-DoF arms, which is like the Aloha kits, to train, because humans are training it. And we'll go through a phase of that. And it could be 2 years, it could be 10, I don't know. But eventually the machine learning models will get so intelligent from that training that we won't need to do imitation learning anymore. So then you'll just run it in a simulation environment, and then you'll ask AI, what is the optimal way to do this? And it'll go, I think it's 2 Delta robots, 2 tabletops, or whatever. Like, it'll create some octopus looking thing in the end and say, this is your ideal form factor. And it'll learn how to train itself. A human won't train it anymore. And so we'll move away from it. But right now in research, humanoid torsos make sense, right? You just don't need the legs.
Yeah. And of course, I know we've talked a little bit about humanoids now, but Trossen is, you guys produce hardware. So do you kind of feel kind of pressure to kind of, from these viral videos, and especially of humanoids, to kind of play the same game and kind of and make a humanoid robot? Have you ever thought about it, just because it will probably sell quite well, and although you may not fully believe in the timing of it, have you ever thought about deploying a humanoid to kind of capitalize on this hype right now?
Not really, no, because I don't want to sell them. I don't have the money to make a full-blown humanoid. We don't have that kind of investment. Do I feel pressure to make more viral videos? Yes, very strongly. Any company wants to get attention, and you see all these other companies getting huge attention and getting massive IPOs or massive investment. And I sit back and go, I'd like some of that money, right? And if just putting these hype videos out gets me that money, maybe I should be playing that game a little more. But then that's like the devil on your shoulder, and the angel goes, well, what about expectations? In reality, you're comfortable typing and taking money you shouldn't, right? And I'm not. So next year, you're going to see a lot more videos coming out with us when we release our next line of products, which will move in this direction somewhat. We're going to do our own version of hype videos, I suppose you could say, but they'll just be marketing videos, promotional videos, and we're going to be very honest about what they can do, right? Yeah. So I don't know if it's the same hype video in the way you're using the term right now.
Or maybe honestly what they can't do, right? Going back to what I said about showing, the failure modes, like what can't it do? And like show just a montage of your robot, say, falling over in these like really challenging and tasks, right? And pose a challenge to the community. Like, can you make our robot do something cool?
Right, exactly. And so what we've always done, and sort of our bread and butter, is we put training videos out and informational videos. And you go to our YouTube channel, and we have 20 years of history of us making videos explaining the technology. And we'll be doing that in the machine learning space. Like right now, we're doing a series on best practices for data collection, because we've realized that people that are buying kits right now are getting themselves into trouble because they're trying to do things badly, right? They're not following some best practices, and they're collecting some bad data, and they're having a hard time replicating it. Then we realized, we need to put some very entry-level tutorials out about do's and don'ts that we consider to be common sense. But they really aren't. Like, if you are a worker who's been hired and knows nothing about robots to come in and do data collection, you're going to do things, that you're not aware aren't correct, right? And
100%.
they're beating the hell out of the arms. I'll tell you that. They're trashing them. It's a great use case scenario because we're learning like what's breaking on the robots and
Yes.
fixing them very quickly. So that'll help improve our products. But those types of videos, absolutely. And so when we release the next line of products, we'll have a technical demonstration that shows them doing probably like the most advanced things they can do. But we're going to be very careful about making sure we state that fact and say, these aren't intended to be on assembly lines yet, even though they sort of look like it and they're sort of mimicking that behavior. We're not trying to sell them to you that way. We're trying to sell them to your research department. And then we want to have pilot projects with you so that we can learn with you what these can and cannot do. We need to put them in the field and do trial and error, right? Because we don't know. We're not automation specialists where we're building stuff in factories. And there are professionals out there who do that. And so next year, we're going to start launching more pilot alpha programs where we want to partner with these companies closely and say, you know, what type of gripper changes do you need? Do you need servo speed or torque changed in certain joints? How are people using these things? And learn with them to try and learn how to deploy this technology into the field. And I would like to make a lot of videos, there's tutorials about that, showing behind the scenes and saying, here's what to expect. Here's how you train them. Here's what they can do. Here's what they cannot do. Please don't buy our kit if you think you're going to start sewing shoes with them, because it's not going to happen, right? I think we'll get there in due time, but there's just a lot to learn still. A lot to learn, you know, and you know, one of your questions that I know is coming up is you wanted to ask about like unpopular opinions, right? And I think one of my unpopular opinions is that I think it's going to take a lot longer than people want. And so it's, I don't know if it's unpopular so much as it's a bubble popping disappointment opinion, right? Because people want that robot that's going to clean their home, you know, in a year or two, and it's not there yet, right? And it is just the next wave of automation, right? Like robotics is just another machine that's going to do repetitive tasks for us, right? People get scared of robots because they think they look, you know, it's uncanny valley, it's human-like, and they think this thing's really going to take my job. When the actuality of it is it's like a CNC machine with legs, right? Or wheels, and it's mobile and it has eyeballs so it can deal with changing environments. And that's really all these robots are, right? So we're going to automate the next wave of tasks that humans are already abandoning in droves that have no interest doing them, you know, like farming work or repetitive stuff on assembly lines or packaging things all day long in boxes, right? People don't want to do them. They already cannot hire enough people to do them. So robots are going to step in and sort of take care of that while we move on to other jobs. So the unpopular opinion is setting expectations. So the technology is moving lightning fast, but the implementation of a new technology takes time because that's humans doing it and trying to figure it out and learn how to do it. But so if you look at something like, let's look at smartphones again, like those rolled out extremely quick, right? Because the infrastructure was already there essentially. Well, except for cell phone towers, we had to make those. But the infrastructure to build electronics, people knowing how to use phones, there wasn't a big behavior change. People already knew how to operate computers and phones at the time. So we adopted very quickly that technology. Like it ramped up in no time at all. But if you look at something like cars, for instance, when that technology was brand new, the motors worked and they were powerful. And, you know, we put wheels on something and it worked and it drove around. But rolling cars out as a national form of transportation took decades, right? We had to build the roads. We had to create street signs and rules. We had to train people how to drive. They had to deal with pedestrians and horses that behaved very differently at the time. We had to build gas stations so people could fill them, refill them. We had to build mechanic shops so that we could repair them. We had to create standardizations of things like tires and machine parts so that they were easily repairable. The costs had to come down. All of this stuff had to happen for the technology of the internal combustion engine being something that could transport goods and people to be rolled out into society, right? Robotics is similar, right? It's going to take a long time to figure out what are the form factors, create standards. So for instance, people are like, well, we're going to have robots delivering food, anytime soon now. And it's like, well, but if you really think about the problem at hand, how are they opening doors?
Yep.
How are they pushing buttons to cross crosswalks? When they get inside a store, who's going to give it the right order? You have a shelf full of random bags with little names on them that the robot cannot read. So how does it fetch the thing? When it gets to the apartment building, how is it getting into the elevator and bringing it upstairs?
Yeah. They're all challenging problems in their own right? Where actually entire companies are trying to solve these individual challenges, like in isolation almost.
And that takes time, right? That is going to take years and years of trial and error to solve, right? And so people see these hype videos, these robots doing amazing things. It doesn't mean it's going to be out. We're not ready to commercialize that tech yet. We just aren't.
Yeah. So on the topic of unpopular opinions and also on the topic of hype, I think imitation learning, right? So we're moving maybe a little bit away from the hardware side, but to the kind of more AI software side. Unpopular opinion that's at least I like to kind of sprout is that imitation learning is essentially we're all lying to ourselves, right? It's doomed to fail. And I don't know where you stand on this one, so it'll be interesting. But maybe I'll give you my hot take, and then we'll see how you respond. But yeah, I just have this every time I see imitation learning at work. I'm just like kind of curled up into a little ball, and I feel like we're just all lying to ourselves, and we're just not doing other things because imitation learning just seems so easy. I mean, come on, it's just like you collect some demonstrations and you record someone, and then look, it does something cool. But I think we've always got to remember with imitation learning, right, that you're only showing it what to do, right? You're not showing it what not to do. It actually has no idea of actually the semantics of the task. Like if we're honestly real, it's literally just mimicking what it's seeing. And I always like to give an example here of cooking, right? You've got a pot on the stove, and you're trying to like teach it to like, I don't know, pick up the saucepan lid and then stir it and put it back on, right? So imitation learning is just going to, tell you to do that. But the robot doesn't learn any sense of like what's hot, right? It doesn't learn any sense of like, oh, if I go and touch and I miss and I touch the fire where the flame is, I'm actually going to burn my end effector. And that's like a really bad thing to do, right? And so I have this opinion that like we're all just kind of messing around right now and kind of avoiding actually the problem, which is like really like we need to be doing reinforcement learning, or like we need to be using demonstration-driven reinforcement learning. We can't not have demos. That's not what I'm saying. I think they definitely belong there. But ultimately, the learning algorithm cannot just be something like, ACT or diffusion policy and predicting, going from images to actions. We actually have to understand how valuable things are, right? We have to understand like regret, consequence. And that's on the action side, but also from a safety perspective. Like, how are we going to safety certify these things? Do you really want a humanoid like chopping, or any robot actually, doesn't have to be a humanoid, chopping some carrots,
knives,
and with knives, and then your little kind of kid comes running up behind you? I mean, can you imagine like having an end-to-end policy running with like zero interpretability?
Yeah,
it's mind-boggling, right?
Yeah. Well, so that you're talking about a robot cooking in a home with all these variables around, like kids and stuff. Like that's when I say like that's not happening anytime soon.
Yeah.
Like, we're probably more than 10 years away from that. That could be 20 years away. I think to get more success out of this stuff, you have to really narrow it down, right? So that's why it's a workbench, and you're training it to take this mug and put it in this box and then close the box, right? It's got to be very, very simple. You've got to lower that bar to where it can accomplish it, right?
Yeah.
Which is how you often roll out new technologies. And you sort of scale in, because you don't really have to worry about like what is hot and why am I putting this chicken in this pan, and am I making a meal? Like you're like, it doesn't know it's making a meal, right? It just sees brown pixels going to the center of a circle of black pixels, right? And so you have to choose tasks where that is okay, where that's enough, right? Like I want this mug to go in this square box, and that's it, right? But the box could have moved around, and the mug could be different colors. I just want you to identify this circular object, pick it up without crushing it, put it in this box. I think imitation learning can be successful there. And you're right. You also have to say, you missed it, or you crushed the lid, or you did this, or you did that. And I think in that, it's similar to when they trained AI on the internet. It was humans had to say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. This is a positive response. This is a negative response. And to your point, like, you should have a human saying, this is bad. You failed to get the egg cracked in the pan. Yes, no, yes, no. So it gets some more understanding. And you will have to layer in general AI on top of this stuff, right? So I think you're right. Imitation learning is just a piece of the puzzle. It's one small piece, and people need to recognize that, definitely. Some of that stuff's over my pay grade. I don't really understand how these things are learning and doing all that. I am a hardware guy and a programmer, and I understand, hard variables and functions, not neural nets. It's over my head. I'm trying to sell hardware to the people who understand that stuff. So what needs to be done to accomplish that is a question for somebody outside me. But I agree that there's a lot more to it before you roll that out, right? I think there's going to be some more breakthroughs, where they're attaching, general intelligence to these things that has a better understanding. But again, we have a few decades to figure this out.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, definitely. And switching gears a little bit here, I assume you've kind of seen some of these companies spinning up that are basically doing mass data collection, and I'm talking about like warehouses of people collecting data day in, day out, 24/7. Is that the solution to robotics?
I don't know. Because again, that's an AI researcher, and I don't know. I'm not educated in that area, so I don't have that answer. I would imagine you would have it better than me. I'd want to flip that question back around on you.
So yeah, I like to think of it. So I like to take a step back and actually think about why do people think that's the solution? And I think I think people come to that because of ChatGPT, right, and language models, and they think, look what language models have done. Like, look what just throwing data at a problem has done, right? And they're like, great, robotics can be solved the same way. But I think kind of, for me, people just cannot fathom actually how much data these language models have been trained on, right? They have been trained on almost every single piece of text that humanity has ever made that's like been documented, right? Then by the internet, and the internet has documented a lot of text, right? You've got history books, that are span thousands of years or something, that's also been kind of documented and scanned in and translated, and etc. So there's just this incredible amount of all of human history being distilled into these models, and that's why they are so good, right? And so we have the internet to train that, but we don't have the internet for robotics. Like, what's the equivalent for that, right? I guess the closest we have, of course, is social media videos, right? So if we can untap, obviously, that, I think, of course, that is a scalable way to do it. But I mean, this idea of actually just brute forcing, essentially we're trying to brute force all of like human history, right? And as if go back and write, have everyone like be in these warehouses and write every single piece of text that's ever been. That's kind of what we're asking to do, which is an impossible task, right? So yeah.
I think video is one answer. Like imitation learning, we're recording the joint positions, right? And how someone's done something, which is necessary to train the models at the moment. And I think a leap that has to get made, and I'm sure there's researchers working on this, is that you just take a video and it can see what's happening with the arm and figure it out. I think if you layer on point clouds so that it has a 3D map of what it's watching as well, then it would go a long way to giving it the data it needs, right? Because like if you were to stick, stereo vision cameras with point clouds all around houses and factories and workplaces and everywhere, then it has like a physical model of what the motion that everyone's doing is. And that's what we're trying to feed into the model. And then if the AI can then learn that so well that it then it doesn't need the point clouds and it just can look at a video and understand it. Now it can train on, the countless hours of videos we do have, right? And I think that moves it closer to LLMs using just text off the internet, because then we have mountains of data. But right now I think that 2D vision of it doesn't really truly understand what's happening in 3D space, right? And that's why imitation learning is necessary, because you're adding the arm into that. And so I would guess that we need to move towards that sort of learning, and more of that's happening, right? Like, because you have LiDARs on smart cars running around collecting data, right? And that's, kind of rudimentary, and it's all out on streets and everything. But imagine if we start moving that inside, right? And around buildings and places, and it's probably going to happen whether people consent or not, right? Like, if you work here, know that you're getting recorded at all times, and we're recording your body movements, and we're watching how you are doing things, and we start collecting that data, and then that starts going into the cloud. It's probably the next phase of this. And I think that the current phase is just going to help bridge the gap in the meantime, so that we can do very isolated movements, right? Like workbenches that are doing repetitive tasks, right? Where we're collecting that. And like, we have added point clouds into our data collection, right? And I think that's the way it's got to go, right? But I think also if we just relax and realize that it's going to take some time to figure it out, right? Like, it's going to take a little time, and there'll be some geniuses in some back rooms that have aha moments and figure out how to tie things together, and it'll make leaps the way that, ChatGPT did, right? Where they're like, oh my God, this thing works. Like, it can actually give me intelligent responses and help me code and understand what I'm asking it and go do the work. And it literally automates intellectual labor, right? It's amazing tech. There is no doubt in my mind that we'll get there in robotics. Like, this is my life's work, right? I've done this for 21 years, and I'll keep doing it, because it's going to happen. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Undoubtedly, it's just when and how. And I don't know if it's imitation learning, right? I mean, obviously this would be a whole lot easier if you just did it in simulation, right? And you just used up a bunch of, teraflops in a cloud or something. I don't know the answers to that. As a hardware supplier, as the guy who's selling shovels during a gold rush, God, I hope they figure it out. I really do. Because I've spent a lot of money and time on it.
Absolutely. And so shifting away back from software back to hardware again, and to ask a very simple question. Do we have everything we need from the hardware perspective? Is it purely software now that's missing? Or do you think there's something, the missing gap that we need to unlock the intelligence, but from a kind of hardware perspective specifically?
No, to answer that, hell no. Like, we have a long way to go in hardware, right? I mean, nature doesn't make rotary motors, right? And robotics, we literally trademarked this phrase. Robotics is the art of reverse engineering nature, right? So we have to learn how to keep reverse engineering nature. Nature doesn't make rotary motors. I believe there's only one instance of a rotary motor in all of nature, and it's the flagellum on a little bacterium. Nature will mimic wheel motions, and things like tumbleweeds or spiders might roll down a sandhill that way. But in terms of a spinning wheel, we don't make them, or nature doesn't make them. So we need to make electric muscles that are very efficient. So it's a material sciences issue. When we do that, things are going to get a whole lot lighter and a whole lot more efficient. If you look at humanoids or animals, we can survive all day on a peanut butter sandwich, right? We're unbelievably efficient, right? And currently in robotics, our energy storage in batteries is horrific. They're extremely heavy, and they don't carry a lot of energy. We've got a long way with lithium batteries, but we still have a long way to go. So the two things I think we need to do is we need to make electric muscles, and we need to have lighter energy storage. In that case, software is probably ahead of us, because you can simulate, an animal trying to learn how to walk in a few hours, and it'll be successful, right? Physically, we don't have that yet. We have very heavy motors that literally have metal coils inside them of copper with all these heavy gears trying to change, rotational motion into linear motion. And it's not efficient, and it's heavy, and it's super expensive. So in hardware, that has to be done. People are really trying to make more efficient motors. We're getting into that, so we want to own the full stack. So we're going to be making our own servos by next year ourselves, trying to make them as efficient as we can. But like, we're going to hit, the limitations of physics, right? It's like so much more you can get out of a coil, right?
Right. So where do you see soft robotics landing in this then? Is that something that you've thought much about?
We don't really deal with it here. I think soft robotics for end effectors is a thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we'll probably start introducing those sometime next year. The market will lead us, right? So the market will tell us if it wants it or if it's useful. But modular end effectors is clearly one of the next steps here, so people can swap things in out. The other area that I was going to say that hardware needs to catch up is we need skin, right?
Right.
We need to be able to sense force and pressure, with a high resolution all over our end effectors, right? And until we get that, the robot's running blind. Like, it doesn't know what it's doing. It can't feel what it's doing. It has a very rudimentary understanding of like a grasp because there's some pressure, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really dumb robot. So that has to be solved as well. And that sounds like a very hard problem. I know a lot of people are working on it. When you go to conferences, there's lots of touch-based sensors that people are trying to put on hands, but they're extremely expensive and they're extremely low resolution.
Yeah.
So hardware needs to solve that as well.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. And one last question to kind of finish off here. So if you kind of look ahead, how do you want Trossen to show up in this kind of hype versus reality conversation that we've been having? And what's like one thing that specifically you're doing to committed to doing quite differently?
I'd like us to continue being the shovel seller, right? Like, so it's a gold rush. You have a lot of prospectors. They want to work at an application layer. So they need hardware, right? And I think there'll be thousands of companies showing up into this space who don't want to play with hardware, right? So we want to continue to be that hardware supplier and continue to improve in those products. So better servos, better controllers, better APIs, integrate more of the technology into this stuff, make it easier to upload things into clouds and train them and download them back to the robots, right? So trying to help solve that problem, and then again, just sort of advertise that stuff with realistic expectations of what the hardware can and can't do. So for instance, like payloads, right? There's a pain point where people don't really have a good understanding of what payloads an arm can do, right?
Right.
So people just put a number. It can lift 1.5 kilograms to 3 kilograms, and that's a crappy way to do it, right? So what we're working on right now is we want to have arms do like exercises, if you will. It'll do different motions, and then we will rate them and say, if you have a torso that has an arm and it's doing this sort of lifting motion, we guarantee it can do that for 4-second cycles with 4 kilograms for 4 hours or something, or it'll do it indefinitely without overheating, right? I think we need to move from just payloads to payloads characterized by work cycles in certain motions, right? So our arms, like our next tabletop arms, we're going to have like really cool interactive graphs or 3D graphs, if you will, where you can say when you're in this zone, it can lift 5 kilograms. When you're in this zone, it can do 3, this zone 2, this zone 1. And give much better data on what to expect from these. Because what happens is these people buy manipulators and they start trying to do their research and they realize they can't accomplish what they thought it could, and they don't think through some of the basics like, well, yeah, when an arm is close to its body, it can lift a lot of weight. When you have a full extension, that evaporates very quickly, right? And you have very little at the end that you can do. So by helping them understand what is reality, right? Like how fast will this motor overheat, right? Like you're going to get this sort of work for 5 minutes and then you've got to cool down for a while. And helping them with that, I think that helps calm the hype down and helps let people work within expectations, right?
Yeah.
And then have better success, right? We also want to have a closer relationship with the companies to learn like what are the end effectors that are working for you, like soft grippers and compliant grippers. That everyone's moving in that way right now.
Yeah.
So starting to do that sort of stuff. I'm sure you've seen it. Putting fingernails on them is something we're interested in, right? Putting sensors on them so that those have their own feedback. Expectations about what those can do. And again, us putting videos out and sort of educating the public. I think a lot of that is necessary. So almost it's like an anti-hype, putting anti-hype information out there and saying, here's what can be done, there's plenty to be excited about without talking about humanoids doing backflips.
Yeah, love that. Well, Matt, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. This was fun.